are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by City Council. The other individuals seated at the table this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city attorney's office, and the consultant is not here tonight, so they are not present. If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on a sign-on sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, PDAs, or any other devices that might disrupt this meeting, please either be placed in silent mode or be turned off. Tonight, before we do the roll call, I just wanted to mention that Don Edmonds, one of our planning commissioners, passed away a couple nights ago. And he served with us. He was a member of our team. He served the city. And we will miss him greatly. And we will have some open time at the end of the meeting for anyone to share their thoughts, anyone to share their memories of Don. And I just wanted to mention that before we move forward with the meeting tonight. So at this point, I just wanted to ask Ms. Zarnicki for the roll call.
Mr. Abhidian?
Here.
Ms. Cruz?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Ms. Koopa?
Here.
Mr. Zanzika?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Ms. Howe?
Here.
Quorum present. Moving on to item number 2 on the agenda, approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved by Mr. Faison, second by Ms. Koopa. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes. Item number 3, approval of the minutes for the July 2018 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Zanzika and seconded by Ms. Cruz. Can I get the roll call, please, Ms. Zarnicki?
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Item number 4, public comment for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Please come forward and identify yourself and sign in, please.
Good evening. My name is Avis Landmesser. I live at 568 Ottawa in Troy, North Troy. And again, I have to revert to my notes, so I'll make sure I remember everything. You get to a point in life you don't remember everything. I am not at all sure how citizens can receive answers to questions posed to your body or to hear a possible discussion of those issues. And Mr. Savidant has been very helpful and patient with me, explaining how the planning department operates, especially as it pertains to cluster housing. But I would very much like to hear the Planning Commission discuss some issues and questions of residents. At the July 10 meeting, Ms. Cruz asked if the commission could talk about some of those issues, questions that evening. But the assistant city attorney advised against it, said it would be better to include them on a future agenda. I sincerely hope that will happen and that residents will be able to join in the conversations and will be welcome to those conversations. Please consider a planning department the department agenda format that would include a Q&A slot for resident concerns and questions, because surely I'm not the only person in Troy that's interested in planning issues, and they should be heard from too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to speak? If not, we will move to item number 5 on the agenda, Zoning Board of Appeals, the ZBA report. Ms. Koopa?
There were 5 items on the agenda for our last ZBA meeting. 2 of them were taken off the agenda, so we ended up with 3 of which we approved 2 variance requests because there was practical difficulty. It met those 2 requests met the criteria, 1 did not. And then we will be taking up 1 at our August meeting. We also have a special meeting in July for another request. So that's busy ZBA.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes.
I wonder, could you give us a little more detail on the items that were approved?
1 in particular sticks out because it was a pool that it didn't follow the setback, and when it was drained, there were some concerns about a child who's autistic, and there were some safety issues raised, but there was someone in the audience that wanted us to discuss it even though we postponed it, so we allowed for public comment on it, but we postponed actually deciding on the variance request. I would say that the report we got from Mr. Evans was that there was no safety concern because there was no, Brent, do you know the case I'm talking about? I don't have the address.
The backyard pool?
Yeah.
I believe it was constructed in the wrong, without permits in the wrong spot. It was too close. It did not, it encroached on the required setback.
Right, and the gentleman from the property behind it came and gave us public comment, as well as one of the neighbors, and so we have that in public record because they were there, but we're going to hear it in the August meeting. That was the one that was postponed. As far as the 2 that were approved, they displayed practical difficulty. I don't have the minutia of why, but in their application itself, they listed, and we found that to be reasonable, whereas 1 that we denied, there was nothing listed why it was a practical difficulty. She wanted the woman who was applying for it wanted to build a larger sunroom, enclosed sunroom, and it would have, the setbacks would not have fit in her property because it was a smaller property. There's no practical difficulty as such, which is why we denied it. I think Mr. Eisenbacher was the only dissenting, but the rest of us agreed that there was no practical difficulty to grant that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, Planning and Zoning Report. Mr. Savidan.
Yes, August 14th, Planning Commission meeting in 3 weeks. We'll be reconsidering the proposed cluster development off of Ottawa, as well as a special use application for some building renovations on Big Beaver, at 215, 275 Big Beaver. So we continue to be busy processing applications.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Savidan. We will move on to item number 7 for tonight. Public hearing, preliminary site plan review, file number SP JPLN 2017-0026, proposed Midtown Crossing cluster, west side of Rochester, west side of Livernois, north of Long Lake between Creston and Trinway, section 10, currently zoned R1C, 1 family residential district. Mr. Savidan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've talked about continuing to try to inform and engage citizens, explain what it is exactly that we do, because it's still pretty confusing to some people. So what we are considering this evening is another cluster application. This one's called Midtown Crossing Cluster, and they seek preliminary site plan review. The Planning Commission is a recommending body for this application. We're not going to approve or deny this evening. We only make a recommendation. But some in the audience may be asking, what exactly is this cluster development thing we keep hearing about? Well, cluster development, it's a zoning concept, and it essentially involves grouping or clustering homes within a development so that the remaining open space, the land that you preserve when you cluster the units closer together, can be preserved as open space. And there's a lot of benefit in preserving open space, such as preserving natural features and preserving the character of the area. And you've seen this example numerous times. This is an example of how this works using very simple concepts. The drawing on the left is a representation of property with some wetlands and some wooded areas. That's the subject parcel. And the first step in developing a cluster is to present what's called a parallel plan. And a parallel plan is basically the maximum development potential of a site, assuming all the underlying zoning requirements are met. So in this example, the parallel plan yields 60 units. To the right is an example of what can be created using the cluster development. If you preserve the minimum requirement of open space, which is 20%, you get a compensatory 20% bonus in the number of units. So in this instance, they've preserved 20%, picked up 20% more units. 20% of 60 is 12, and those additional 12 units yields 72 units. Those 72 units are grouped closer together or clustered closer together, and the trade-off being more density but more open space preserved. And this open space area is required to be in contiguous and in the form of a conservation easement so that it can be preserved in perpetuity. So that's the 40-second summary of what a cluster is. And anyone in the audience who wants more information, you can contact me at the planning department. I'm happy to provide it to you. So the parcel that we're referring to this evening is located on the west side of Rochester Road between Creston and Trinway, and the present zoning is R1C, one family residential. However, the northern portion, which is this portion here, is controlled by what's called a consent judgment, basically a court order, which was entered into between the property owner and the city in 2006. So this is a sketch of the consent judgment of the proposed development. This is actually taken from the consent judgment that was approved in 2006. And the judgment basically gives the property owner the right to develop this 12-unit attached project plus keep the existing house for a total of 13 units. In 2015, this application was submitted. It essentially mirrors what is in the consent judgment. Again, the yield is 13 units, and the total acreage up for this parcel is 2.74 acres. So, the property to the north in blue is a 2.74 acre parcel, and the applicant purchased this property with the intent of developing it, and then acquired the property to the south, which is about 1.15 acres. Notice something on the aerial. Although the street has not been constructed yet, the street name is in place for the project that was approved in 2015, and the units are numbered. The project's basically ready to be constructed. However, the applicant acquired the property to the south with the intent of building a better quality development. And this was basically stimulated by the fact that they read our cluster ordinance and liked what they read and wanted to proceed with the cluster development. So their intent at the end of the day is to amend the consent judgment to basically eliminate that development and go forward with the cluster. So as you know, they submitted the parallel plan, which yields a total of 9 units. And you see the street that comes in with the parallel plan and the detention basin at the back. And that's their magic number. They're proposing 39% open space, so they get a 39% density bonus in terms of the number of units. They're proposing 7 two-family attached units for a total of 14 units. on the site. They're proposing to demolish the existing home. You'll recall the project approved under the consent agreement kept that home. They're proposing to demolish it, proposing a private road, and again, retention of 39% open space. We'll get into the details in a few slides, but the maximum square footage of each unit is 1,485 square feet. This is the first development under the cluster where every unit is under that 1,500 square foot threshold that we've talked about, so these homes are compatible for empty nesters and people with small families or no children. In terms of landscaping, they're retaining 39% open space, providing 45 shade trees, 73 evergreen trees, 14 ornamental trees, 93 shrubs, and they're also preserving 70 inches of trees that are on the site. Significant landscaping on this site, significantly more than what was proposed under the consent agreement. These are the floor plans, again, 1,485 square feet. The floor plan on the left is the two duplexes, and here's the common wall down the middle. And to the right is a blow up of one of the units. You notice they have a first floor master suite, first floor master and first floor laundry. They're ranches, there's no upstairs. 2-car garage. Here's the elevations. Now the applicant did provide a narrative. I couldn't find it electronically when I was putting the packets together. But I was able to get the hard copy, and I scanned it and emailed it to all the planning commissioners in advance of the meeting. And there's also a hard copy that's in front of you this evening, provided by the applicant. And this narrative provides justification for the garage doors, and they're arguing that with the use of quality materials and architectural elements, it draws attention from the 2-car garage at the front of the units. They're providing two options, option A and option B, in terms of elevations. So here's a comparison. I tried to summarize all this in the table. So on the far left column is the categories, starting with site area. The next column over is for the parallel plan. The next column is consent judgment, and then the furthest column to the right is a comparison of the cluster option. So under the parallel plan, it yields 9. The consent agreement, 9 units on 3.89 acres. The consent judgment was 13 units on 2.74 acres. That was a 4.74 unit per acre density. Although this site has one more unit, it's actually a lower density than under the consent agreement because the site's bigger. And so instead of 13, they picked up 1.15 acres of property, but they only added 1 unit. Percentage of open space, significantly more under the cluster. The trees preserved and added 132 trees under the cluster and 93 shrubs, which is significantly more than under the parallel plan under the cluster development. And the housing size, again, is under that threshold of 1,500 square feet. The site is designated in the master plan as Rochester Road. Prior to our update of the master plan in 2008, the master plan supported this density of residential for approximately 30 years. So this is not a new concept. The 2008 version, which was a master plan, which was amended in 2016, supports condominiums along the corridor frontage between the nodes. And one of the goals of that district is to showcase for effective stormwater management and the enhancement of the natural environment, which we feel they've done by developing a detention basin that is a site amenity and adding significant trees and also preserving trees. You're familiar with the standards from section 10.04. I'm not going to read them all, but it's required that the applicant demonstrate meeting a sufficient number of these objectives. So in terms of summary, we believe the request complies with the master plan for the reasons I mentioned a few minutes ago. The cluster development provides a desired housing type of units under 1,500 square feet with a first floor master bedroom. The development adds 1.2 acres and one additional unit. The 39% open space is a significant improvement. The preservation of 70 inches of protected trees plus the increased trees, and they did provide some additional guest parking on the site. So overall, the Planning Commission recommends that the Planning Department, recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the Midtown Crossing Cluster Plan to City Council with one condition, and that is submission of open space preservation covenant for City Attorney review prior to City Council consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Savana. Any questions for Mr. Savana?
Quick one.
Yeah, Mr. Grant.
On the elevations, the color renderings of the elevations, are those the most current with the developers' ideas of minimizing the appearance of the garage doors?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Was the applicant given credit for the square footage being under 1,500 square feet as part of the calculation for density bonus?
I'll answer your question. I haven't done the math, but the applicant could get significantly more units under this option. They basically they get a 1-for-1 bonus above the parallel plan for any unit under 1,500. So right away, 9. So they're right away at 9 additional. So they're potentially 18 plus 39, almost 40%. So 40% of 9 is almost 4 more. So they could easily do over 20.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I think that's where you're going, Mr. Chairman.
It does. Yeah, thank you. Ms. Cruz.
Could you explain what the benefits are to the residents of living on a private road versus a public city-owned road?
Well, the benefits to the residents is you get to pay dues to maintain your road. So the benefits to the neighbors is that instead of a 60-foot private road right away, essentially in this instance in the middle of the development, the private road is only 40-foot wide. So the houses can be closer to the middle of the property, and the space that is saved in that 20 foot, that savings, if you will, of the extra 20 feet goes on the perimeter of the property as open space. So the benefits to the neighbors is more of a buffer area. The private road must be constructed to city standards. It's going to be 28 feet wide, back a curb. It's going to have the same construction requirements and meet the same engineering standards, but it's going to have to be maintained by the association. So the association, the 14 residents, 14 families that reside in this association are going to have to pay dues to not only maintain the road through with snow plowing, et cetera, but also put together a slush fund, if you will, for the depreciation of that road and the eventual need to resurface that road. So that's a reality.
In your experience as a planning director in the city, how often do you see that owner-run associations are successful in achieving the slush fund and making sure that the roads are maintained for the people living in the subdivision?
That I can't answer. I'm not knowledgeable enough to know that. I know we're seeing more and more of private roads recently. It's more of a trend recently. So I don't know.
As a general rule or practice of planning, city development, urban development, are private roads encouraged or discouraged? Or does it matter?
I'm assuming that the homeowners associations are going to be responsible. They're going to do this. It's pretty clear to me that it is a benefit to have a private road for the reasons that we talked about, have more open space, et cetera. So I can only look at it from the point of view of myself living in one of these. I'd be happy to pay dues for the maintenance and upkeep of a road.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
On the site condos, the zoning ordinance requires the city attorney to approve the master deed, and we usually put provisions or make them put provision in that if the private road is not maintained, the city can go in and maintain it and then assess the lots. So there is some protection to make sure the private road's maintained.
Thank you, Mr. Motzney.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson?
Mr. Saban, you indicated in describing this project that the detention area was an amenity. Could you tell us what the amenities are for that?
I'll give you a example of what we don't like, and that's what was approved through the consent agreement, which is a perfectly rectangular detention basin with very few trees around it that looks like a detention basin and adds zero in the way of an amenity for either the residents of this property or the residents of the surrounding properties, versus this detention basin, which is designed to look like it's been there for quite a while, with significant plant material around it, which functions as an amenity, even provides a stormwater function, but also serves as attractive open space that is a place that residents of this development can walk their dogs or go for a stroll, and the neighbors can look at and get some satisfaction of as an amenity.
Will this be fenced or no fence?
This will not be fenced. This will be of a gentle slope, not to exceed 1/6, so that even when there's water in it, it won't be a danger to anybody.
Okay, thank you.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, there are some detention basins, as you've pointed out, Mr. Hudson, in the city, where they've been there for quite a while, and they do not meet that 1/6 standard, and they're fenced, and you see more of them in other surrounding cities where the fence gets rusted and is in disrepair, and the detention basin and the fence becomes an eyesore. That's not what we want. We want detention basins to be amenities.
That's what I was hoping you'd say.
Mr. Savanant, so because that detention basin is an amenity, it has been included as part of the open space, is that correct?
That is correct. Section 10.04 allows that, provided that the basin is an amenity. And in our opinion, it is an amenity.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Savanant? If there are no more questions, I see that the applicant is here. You may step forward, please, and present your project or any other information that you would like to add.
Good evening. My name is Mario Izzi with MJC Companies. First of all, I'd like to extend my condolences sincerely for your loss.
Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, thank you very much for your time this evening. We appreciate all Brent's hard work. It took a little while to get to this point, but we're very pleased with the product. We think this is something that will definitely hold value for consumers. This is a good project for MJC. We're here to answer any questions. I don't think I can add any more to what Mr. Savanant had put in the report, but we're here to answer any questions. We have material boards. We have blow-ups and color renderings of the elevations. We've actually updated the elevations a little bit. We've added a few more architectural features to these facades to try to pull away from these garage doors a little bit. That was a bit of a contentious issue through the negotiations, through the site planning. But any questions, feel free, please.
Thank you. Mr. Savanant.
I think it would be helpful to talk about the garage doors and some of the improvements they've made.
This is a good location for everybody to see. Forget my back. I apologize. First of all, we're
Excuse me, can you just step up to the mic? Maybe we somehow swap them or just...
Absolutely. What we're trying to focus on is reduced maintenance for purchasers. We cannot necessarily provide zero maintenance. We could do that, but if we did, the cost would be ridiculous. We're trying to be fair. We're trying to be marketable. So what we're using masonry materials. We have cast stone. We have brick, vinyl materials. We've added, as far as the architectural features go, we have a certain number of gables. I would classify this as an American craftsman style. We use a variety of woods and vinyls and stones and bricks, so it tries to pull your eye away from the garage doors. The garage doors, what we've done is we've added lights, glass, to break up that panel a little bit. And there's any number of different garage door styles. You know, if this is not something that the Planning Commission feels comfortable with, you know, we could certainly find something else. But we tried to find a balance between colors, good materials, and again, reduced maintenance, but not necessarily zero maintenance. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to add a coat of paint onto some of the trim after 7 to 10 years. It just freshens up the unit, and we can make sure that's in the budget with the homeowners association to make sure that gets done in a typical color, something that's not offensive.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant, Ms. Cruz?
I'm curious, do you have any idea what your price point on these will be?
Currently, today, we're seeing price increases on all our materials, all our trades. We're seeing about 10 to 15% from last year to this year. That's not something that we can necessarily control. We're forecasting to answer your question, should this project go in, if it's a winter development and we're going vertical next year with another 10 to 15% price increase, petroleum prices, concrete prices, we're probably going to be right around the low 300s for these units. That's what we're forecasting. Again, the market price of the final unit is going to be dependent on the development costs. What we find when we start to develop, if there's any groundwater issues, for instance, bad soils issues, those add to building costs, development costs, that sort of thing. But as of right now, we feel very comfortable. Low 300s would be the market price for a 1,500 square foot duplex unit in Troy on Rochester Road.
And then I assume that there's a list of upgrades that homeowners can,
yes, ma'am, of course,
pick from.
Yes, absolutely.
Ms. Cooper?
The garage doors, those are windows, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So is that, if I opted out, then would that just be solid I would do that?
Based on our conversation this evening, if those lights or if that glass was a requirement based on the cluster option for the elevations for the facades, if that was part of the recommendation and we have to include that in the building plans, then I have to say to you as a client, I cannot offer you a garage door without the lights. I have to include the lights.
So at this point, you're considering that as an option for the buyer and not the standard. So that elevation is more of an upgrade elevation,
I would
somewhat?
say it's more of an upgrade elevation, somewhat, correct? But if you told me those garage doors had to have the lights in it, I wouldn't argue with you, and we would make those a standard item.
Okay.
It's in our best interest to try to hold the curb value. It's only going to help the value of the product overall through the end. So,
Mr. Tagle.
Side elevations or rear elevations, what kind of materials are you using on them?
For the side elevations, we propose a brick belt, masonry belt. There's a cast stone trim masonry piece that goes around the perimeter. Above that, I'm just going to point to it. Above that is a non-siding material, horizontal siding material. Again, low maintenance.
Your product looks very nice from the street, but when I hear vinyl siding, that takes it back a notch for me.
Okay.
There are other products out on the market, cement fiber panels or siding, that I think would go along more with what quality materials I'm seeing on your front elevation. I mean, to me, vinyl siding is not a product that I would expect to see on the elevation that I'm seeing in the front, your colored, your rendered elevations.
If I may, to respond to that, we have used a James Hardie cementatious siding.
Yep.
It just adds to the cost. It adds to the ultimate, what's the cost of the final product. So we're trying to still keep it in the low 300s, keep it affordable. It might not seem like it's a big upgrade, but it adds up. That material is very expensive. The vinyl siding, there are thicker vinyl sidings that can be used. That could also be something we can talk about as far as the architectural minimums as part of the cluster. There's different textures, different shapes.
Yeah, for me, vinyl siding's vinyl siding.
Understood.
I mean, when I look at a piece of vinyl, I'm not going to know how thick it is.
Well, I was only going to offer that because if it's thicker, it usually would last a little bit longer.
I certainly understand that.
Right.
But it doesn't compare to a fiber cement siding product as far as durability.
I have a question about the front elevation.
Yes, sir.
Can we go back to that for a minute? The unit on the right actually has a slight variety in that elevation in that front gable, and those two units. And I'm looking at the unit on the left, and it's fairly symmetric. I don't see much variation there, or is there? Maybe I don't see it from here. Is there a variation in that unit? So is it symmetric? Okay. So my question is would you be able to kind of duplicate what you have in that unit on the right in all the units to create a little bit of variation in those units, even though?
If I didn't say it earlier, what I think would be best for this project, what we'd like to do is maybe alternate facades, if that helps. There's certain tweaks that we can talk about, certain architectural elements we can have. If you notice, one has dormers. It's got a gable.
Right.
It just kind of pulls your eye away from those garage doors. It's a large architectural feature. The dormers do the same thing. They've got the glass. Maybe the sun catches that glass. It catches your eye. It just pulls you away from the garage doors. But I think what we would do in this development would be alternate the facades. One building one, the next building the next. Colors as well. That's something we can talk about just to keep the buildings unique.
Okay.
Some people have an issue with the repetition, doing the same. Obviously, for a builder, there's some cost savings there for us to be able to do that, but I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing here at this development.
So the reason why I brought that up and mentioned it is the ordinance requires, the latest ordinance is that there's a variation of ABC for single-family development. So this is attached, and to create that probably would be more of subtle variations even within the two units that are attached, because to get ABC with the attached units would be a totally different, I guess, scope of the project. But that's the only reason I brought that up, in providing that variation similarly to what you have on the right. But just a thought. Any other questions?
Another thought.
Yes, Mr. Point.
I just want to thank you for including the other visual elements along the roof, gables, dormers. That's very helpful. Have you looked at any of the really creative garage doors that actually make them disappear? In other words, with faux brick that actually looks like a wall, or with windows? I think there are some really creative garage doors I've seen.
Admittedly, I'm not familiar with the product. I've heard, I've seen, but it's not something that we've used. So,
okay. I just wanted to throw it out there because these are still prominent. I mean, visually, right away, those roof elements do pull the eye away from them. But bottom line is, garage doors are garage doors.
You're right.
And they look like garage doors.
It's still a 16-foot wide by 7-foot tall architectural element that has to be dealt with. So, what we're trying to do is pull your eye away from it, but you still have to get access from the street.
Well, I would just suggest that you look, do some research on it, and look
Yes, sir.
to see what kind of garage doors are that are camouflage type. There are some really great solutions. I'm sure they're more expensive than what you're proposing.
Right.
That said,
Right.
it would, I think, would help the visual appearance, make it look more like a real, maybe not like a duplex anymore. It would look more substantial, like a larger home, one larger home, and have that appearance of a bigger estate than an obvious duplex.
Correct. I wouldn't be opposed to looking at that. Maybe that's something we could come back and discuss at a subsequent meeting, or something we can work out with the planning department. Obviously, again, you talked about the cost.
Yeah, I understand.
That's something we would have to deal with. I have no idea what a custom door like that would add to the price. So, and then the functionality of it.
I've seen actual homes with them on that are mansion-type homes
Okay.
that are just phenomenal. You'd never know a garage door's there.
Really? Okay. I'm curious now. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one more question.
Yes, sir.
How did you determine your square footage on this? Why the square footage you have? Why not 16? Why not 17? Why not 1750? What was your design process behind that?
One of MJC's, one of their premier products is a duplex style product. We've been building these for decades, with subtle tweaks to the floor plans as styles and tastes change. Larger kitchens, smaller kitchens. Larger masters, smaller masters. So this, in keeping with the 1,500 square foot cap, so we kind of worked backwards from that. We took some existing floor plans that we have that are successful for us, that have been received well by the public. They sell well. They're not necessarily easy to build, but our trades are familiar with them. So it's more of a customization of that product. That's the original genesis of it, and we've honed it down to something that's specifically 1,500 square feet or less with this American Craftsman style.
So you were actually, one of your incentives was to actually stay below that 1,500 because of the bonus.
Absolutely, yes, sir. Yeah, we feel, in speaking with the planning department, Mr. Salvador, we think there's a pent-up demand for single floor, master on the main floor. Not necessarily retirement, but maybe empty nesters, somebody who is maybe ready to downsize a little bit from that 3,000 square foot home, maybe even 2,500 square foot home. They've accepted the fact that they just don't want to take care of the yard anymore, and they're willing to pay the association to take care of that. So that was kind of the logic behind it. We think these will sell very quickly.
Do you have similar developments, Southeast Michigan, that have this similar floor plan and a similar sized development in terms of
floor plan? Yes, sir. The elevation, no. This is more of a custom, specific, special elevation for Troy. But we do have a similar floor plan, similar development in Macomb Township, 24 Mile Road in Card. Where would be another one? Stone Ridge and Warren. So, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up question to that. And so in those developments, are they condos, duplexes, cluster-type developments like this?
I wouldn't call it necessarily a cluster, because I don't want to take away from what you're trying to accomplish here in Troy. This is a very specialized ordinance. This is something we've never seen before. So this is new for us as well. Condo, yes. Duplex, yes. More of just a straight site planning type. This is the density you get on a parallel plan. We may get some bonuses for open space, but nothing that's as specialized as this ordinance.
And then when did you build those two developments?
They're currently under construction. Currently under construction, yes, sir. Yeah.
So then you don't have a situation where you built and sold?
Not that facade.
This footprint.
Not that facade, but a similar footprint, a similar floor plan, currently in Warren and currently in Macomb Township.
Oh, I thought you said they were being built.
Well, they're currently being built. We have people moved in. We still have several units to finish up.
Okay.
So they're under The development portion is done, but the vertical construction is ongoing. So those are under construction. I'm sorry if I misspoke.
No.
Didn't mean to
that's
confuse
fine.
you.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then the last question is the price point for those.
For those are in the high 200s.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Sada.
So it's taken us a while to get here because we spent a lot of time talking about this issue. And it's been respectful, and we've had some really good conversations. I learned more than I ever wanted to know about two-family attached homes. But there are some realities here, and one of the realities is the two-car garage. I mean, I think it still has to be marketable, and I think people still want their two-car garage. You'll remember when we talked about the cluster option, we zeroed in on 1,500 square feet as the empty nester size. Remember, I see Ms. Cruz nodding her head. Some of us thought 2,000 square feet, some of us thought less, and we arrived at 1,500 square feet. This floor plan came in at 1,485, and it was a floor plan that the applicant really liked. When you attach at the common wall with the garages, every foot that you push or you pull has ramifications throughout the whole unit. So if you're at 1,585, you pull that unit forward a couple, like a porch feature forward a couple feet, you've got to steal from the nook or from the kitchen or from the master bedroom or the master bathroom, the laundry room. Everything's got. I respect architects even more after going through this project because of all every square inch matters when you're at this, because it still has to be marketable, and 1,500 square feet you're starting to get pretty small. So I do want to commend the applicant. We talked about coming up with side entry garages. Well, when you have side entry garages, you can meet. It looks better from the street, but now you need more space on the sides. So that open space that you've preserved less open space. So it's almost like pick your poison. So there's benefits to attaching at the common wall. You save more open space, but it almost forces you to have garages in the front. And then and it's got to be a two-car garage to be marketable. So we would have 1 hour meetings just talking about this. So it was a real education.
Ms. Cruz.
All I really have to say at this point is I like the craftsman style that you've developed. I think that it's timeless. And you mentioned that one of the things that you were looking for in this development is you want it to have longevity.
Absolutely.
I think that timeless longevity also comes from quality materials. So I would concur with Mr. Tagle's comment about using something other than the vinyl siding.
Okay.
I think that takes it up a notch in terms of classic. As far as the garages go, they don't bug me, but they don't bug me because you've put the lights in them, and it makes a huge difference in terms of curb appeal. And I would suggest that the lights in those garage doors are a must-have, especially if I am a potential buyer. I'm far more attracted to the idea of having the more decorative garage door since it is a feature on the front of the house.
Just one more question. Are you offering any other colors for the garage doors that are lighter than that door, or is that going to be the garage door?
In all honesty, I never even thought about it, to be honest with you. But that's a great question. We could certainly tone that down a little bit, but the trend right now is to go towards the darker colors, the walnuts, the hickory colors. They seem to be a little more timeless, contrary to my personal preference, but I've been very surprised by how much darker the colors are going, the tones are going, and they seem to be well received. But it's certainly something that we can offer.
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking is I'm looking at that elevation and I'm trying to vision that elevation with like a light tan colored door there, and the garage would definitely pop out more.
Yeah.
And it would be counterintuitive of what you're trying to achieve, what we're trying to achieve,
Right.
to kind of get the garage to.
I think if it's darker, if it's a little more shadowed, it's not as prominent.
Right.
It's still an element, it still has to be dealt with, but I'm open to suggestions.
Mr. Tagle.
Did you just say a lighter door would be more visual attention to it?
It would create more contrast rather than an actual...
What it will do is it'll make that door stick out more.
Right.
You'll see that. So I was going to suggest that the color he's got there is minimizing its effect or its loudness on the street.
Right. Yeah.
And I agree that the lights are absolutely key.
Right, I think...
Because it takes it up over the standard garage. It almost looks like a carriage house type appearance to it.
If I can offer, if I can make a suggestion, and if we can amend our proposal or to make the garage door lights a requirement, if we can add that to the motion, if the Planning Commission feels that's appropriate at this time, I have no problem making that a requirement. As far as the vinyl siding versus the hardy siding, that one I'd like to punt on. I'd like to really go back and check with our buying department, our purchasing department, and see what kind of cost that's going to add to 3 sides of this building. Not only that, but then we've got some shake siding on the front facade. Not as much, it's in the gables. That's probably a wash, but I'd like to go back and see what the 3 sides, if we were to switch over to a cementatious siding, what that would do to the cost. It's not a deal breaker. It's not a development killer, but we're trying to provide value, and it's getting harder and harder to find trades that will work with that kind of material, and they're out there, but we're trying to make it a little more, I guess, less thinking for some of the trades and some of this stuff. But
if I may, I think
yes, sir.
The audience that you're wanting to attract to these are folks that probably would appreciate that a little bit more. I mean,
I would hope so.
If you're talking about empty nesters,
yes, sir.
You know, I don't want to suggest they may have more disposable income, but they may. And as opposed to a vinyl siding, it just, to me, it's a night and day difference to your product. You know, I mean, the front elevation looks great, and then you know what? This is so typical. You know, we see great front elevations, and then we look around on the sides and the back, and there are big areas of vinyl siding, and the detailing is gone, and so I think, again, I would strongly recommend that you really try to work that into your budgeting just to keep the quality of this house. You know, I always. People think that there's building is 4 sides to it.
Yes, sir.
And just because it's not on the street side, especially with all the open space, I don't know if there are any trails or walking paths that are going to be around the back sides of these homes, around the property in the open space.
Around the open space, around the
so
detention pond, yes,
they'll be visible. People will see them. So, all right, one last question: the doors, the garage doors, are those metal or wood?
They could be either or. Okay. Either or. Yeah. The wood doors tend to be very heavy. It tends to be a burden on the garage door openers over time.
I was just asking.
Yeah, we would do a light gauge metal door. Usually they're insulated, but they don't necessarily have to be. But they would be metal, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Cooper?
This is actually for Brent. Can you bring up what we're all looking at? Because I don't think the audience knows yet.
So the applicant indicated there were some minor modifications to this, but this is generally what the elevations look like.
I do want to say, I do find the sides to be very bland. And if you are going to have trails or people are walking around, I think that, one, it's going to be difficult there's no appeal on the sides. I mean, when I looked at the side elevations.
Can we pull up the side? Yeah.
There's no windows, I
believe there's a laundry on that side. That's what that window reflects. That's a laundry room window.
Maybe in the kitchen?
Mudroom. That's a mudroom window on the side, to answer your question. but the kitchen is open. It's an open concept, so it opens up to the windows in the back, in the rear of the nook. And then there's also a lanai on the rear elevation as well, which was included in
No, it's most of the two sides.
What are your other options for the color palette? How much variation is there from these elevations here?
Generally, we tend to stick with the earth tones, just warm colors, nothing, we wouldn't get too fancy with any pinks or blues or purples. Just try to stay within the earth tones.
Any other question for the applicant?
I've got a quick one.
Yes, Mr. Hoover.
Again, focus on exactly what other members have already talked about, but I want to concur with what Mr. Tagle said and what Ms. Cruz said about the vinyl. Just this last week, I'm driving, around Troy, and what would stand out to me is, are the vinyl homes. Mm-hmm. It just, I was on Waddles today, and I was on Long Lake today, and they were the back of the homes because I was on a major street. And it just looked so it just didn't appeal. It had very little appeal at all visually.
If I may ask a question, did you happen to notice the height, the reveal of the siding? Was it something maybe a 4-inch reveal versus an 8-inch reveal?
Most of them were 4.
Like a 4-inch?
Yeah.
That I guess that repetitiveness, it lends itself to more of a, I think we become accustomed to seeing that as more of a vinyl type material. We're used to seeing that.
I just want to concur with them.
Yeah.
I would think for the type of person that moves into Troy expects a little higher end look. Mm-hmm. I don't know the price difference, but you said you're going to look into it. I would say it's going to probably be well worth it for someone to call it home for the next umpteen years, maybe decades. To really be a show place. And that's what we're trying to create in Troy, that visual show place. And the front looks great.
Thank you. We could bring more examples of other siding type materials, the James Hardy cement board material. We could bring other vinyl styles. I don't know if what the protocol is. Is there a work session maybe between the planning department and maybe a few members of the planning commission, or does it have to be in front of the entire? I don't want to waste anybody's time and going back and forth with colors, and I don't want to waste the public's time either. But if you have maybe a side session, we could.
I think that would be something that maybe you could offer as part of the resolution.
Okay.
Either an option or something that you're willing to offer. Mr. Sullivan, we don't offer study sessions in between. It's pretty much what we.
Well, I suppose
the applicant present here.
No application is the same as another one, and every project is unique. Having said that, they are not seeking approval this evening. They're seeking a recommendation.
Yes.
So just reminding the Planning Commission of that. So, for what it's worth.
I want to continue.
Yeah, Mr. Grant.
On the same sides, you have that one lonely window. What about the rest of? I was looking at the plan views, and it appears to me, maybe I've got the wrong drawing, but it appears to me there's some substantial rooms there that could use a bit of.
Right, and that's a common question with the duplex architectural style. You have to, one thing to remind you of, you're going to be right next door to a neighbor, and you're going to be a few feet away. So just for a matter of comfortness and being comfortable and not, they have window treatments, I understand. They do make window treatments, but the kitchen style, we have an open kitchen design and a nook, and the focal point is in the rear yard where the open space is. So we're trying to focus your eye to the back of this voluminous space and to look outside into the rear, not necessarily through the side window at your neighbor that might be cooking or doesn't want to be looked at or bothered. So, but
they do have windows above the eyes.
Correct. Yes. Definitely take a 2-foot wide window by 4 foot tall and turn it on its side and put it up, at maybe at the header height, just to get some natural light in.
And it also adds to the architectural visual elements of the side, that big area of just nothingness.
Right.
Breaking it up with some other elements might visually make it more appealing. I've got another question for you regarding the setbacks.
Yes, sir.
There's, you have a number, unit number 8, you've got a pinch point there of, I can't remember what it was, I should have brought it up faster, but that one doesn't bother me because it's just a pinch point. And number 1 and number 2 is so close to that 40-foot setback. It's roughly 37. Let me bring it up before I misspeak. I had it a second ago, but what I'm getting at is all of them seem reasonable except units number 6. It's 36 feet or 37 feet, and that's like 3 feet. You're asking for, would that be a variance?
No, not for the cluster development, no.
Okay, so they don't have to have that 40-foot setback.
No, this setback complies.
It does, huh?
Yes.
All right, then that's it. I don't have to.
Just one quick point. Originally, the site plan, we didn't have any guest parking. We massaged the locations of some of these units. We did tweak them down a little bit, some of the setbacks. We put them a little closer in order to have room for these guest parking spaces. One thing we want to try to encourage is keep guest parking off the street. So we've provided an area in the back where the T turnaround or the hammerhead would be for the fire department, for the fire trucks to turn around. We've incorporated some guest parking there as well. Just another feature. So that did affect, couple inches, maybe a foot here and there, and then we had enough room for some guest parking. So.
Thank you. Mr. Faison.
Just a clarifying question. Just with Mr. Crunt's point, I thought it said in the document that the applicant was seeking a deviation of up to 4 feet for perimeter setbacks for 4 of the units.
Which is approvable by City Council. So upon approval of the application, it would comply.
That's
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry.
I understand now.
It's a long-winded way. Yeah.
I understand.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you. Was there anything else? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. So tonight we do have a public hearing for this item on the agenda. And a public hearing is an opportunity for residents to share their comments on a specific project with the Planning Commission. Everyone in attendance who wishes to speak will be provided with an opportunity to speak. We appreciate everyone who came out tonight to share their thoughts with the Planning Commission. Your comments are important. Before I open up a public hearing, I just want to set up some ground rules so that it can be an effective and efficient public hearing. Please remember to sign in and begin your comments by stating your name and address for the public record. Please address all comments to the chair. Please be respectful of the Planning Commission, the consultants, the applicant, and those in attendance. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. The timer is right here in the front, and it will have the yellow light turn on when you have 1 minute left, and when the red light comes on, it indicates that your time is up. This is an opportunity for residents to provide comment, and it's not a discussion or a debate. We respectfully request that you refrain from talking, clapping, or cheering during the meeting. Thank you. So at this time, I just want to open up a public hearing. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this item.
Did you suggest a time limit, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I did.
3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Thank you.
3 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this item on the agenda? Yes, please come forward and sign up and identify yourself.
Hello, my name is Lindsay Mathias. My address is 843 Trinway. I'm here tonight basically just because I want to mention some concerns that I have about this development. Primarily, my major concern is living on Trinway. Our street currently is used as a major cut-through with traffic. During rush hour traffic, the intersection at Long Lake and Rochester becomes pretty congested, especially with the light and then the Michigan left that people have to make. So a lot of people will cut down our street to be able to get to Rochester Road. And with this development there, that means that there are potentially 14 units full of people living there that would then cut down our street to be able to make a right turn onto Rochester and a right turn into their street. And we have no sidewalks on our street. So my son, along with all the other children, have no sidewalks to keep them safe. And we have enough problems with buses that run. My son has tried to get on the bus. People don't even stop for the buses on our street currently. The bus lights come on, the stop sign comes out, and people just drive right around the bus. So it's a big concern for safety, and I know that at like budget meetings in the city, the Planning Commission, along with other people, sit down, and that's one of the big things you guys are concerned about is safety in the city with decisions that are made, and this is a big safety issue, is you're adding more traffic. So I don't know if a consideration can be made either to choose a different option for where this clustered site can be put, or put sidewalks in on our street as a part of this development going there, or make it so that traffic can't cut down our street anymore if this site is put there. So we need something, because this is going to make it even more of a nightmare, and it's not going to be safe. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak on this item?
Very sorry for your loss. I'm sure it's very hard to not have him here tonight. A concern that I brought was thinking, what about snow removal? Like, where does it go? Like, and parking on my mother lives in a very similar community, just like this. And I really do appreciate that there's parking at the end of the street. I'm wondering, though, for the people at the beginning who, this is a proposed community of up in age. So you say 14, 3, 4, 5, 6 units, all of their friends are going to have to walk down and towards the end. I do see a concern there. It's very identical to where my mom lived, and there was no room on the street in between, let's say, like 5 and 6. There's nowhere to park. Is it going to be one-sided parking on the street or no parking at all? Because if my mama had her friends coming, they would tell her, "I'm very sorry, but I can't visit you because you're too far away and I can't walk that far." And that's a really true story. I do see that concern, and I'm just wondering about snow, and I was wondering really what the pathway was for to the retention pond, since the retention pond really has no purpose except for our water. Like, is it for us to go sit and fish, or those are just a couple of my thoughts.
Thank you.
Did she say her name? Marcia Boston.
Anybody else wishes to speak on this item? If not, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the table for any comments. Yes, Mr. Hudson.
I like this project. This is one of the better cluster developments I think we've seen in quite a while. The only suggestion I would make is with the open space covenant, which will be reviewed by the city, that is specifically contained a provision regarding display of monuments, or I'm not quite sure what you need to prevent what I call the backyard creep from each home into the open space.
Any other comments? Mr. Savidan, can you address the purpose of that black area there from the road to the retention?
I'll have this, how about we have the applicant's engineer address it?
I can answer that question. Again, Mario Izzi with MJC Companies. With detention ponds come maintenance. There's always the possibility of clogging or overflow or the inlet or the outlet pipe to get jammed up with something, who knows what. So Public Works, if in an extreme scenario, if the condominium association didn't get somebody out there fast enough and this detention pond started to overflow, you need to have some sort of a hard surface access to get to that pond to maintain that. I don't know if this thing holds water. It should hold some water. If it's something we want to put some sort of an aeration system, we want to put a fountain. I don't know how the Planning Commission feels about those. Some municipalities like them, some hate them. We find that they aerate the water, it tries to reduce the amount of algae. The association will have to add some chemicals to try to reduce the amount of algae buildup, but it's kind of a fact of life with these detention ponds that do hold water. So we do like to use fountains. It adds to the maintenance costs, the annual maintenance costs to the association, but this is a little higher end development. I think we all agree. I don't think it'll break anybody to add a fountain to that, but that's what the pathway, the hard surface is for to have access for maintenance to the pond.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Krent.
Just a quick comment. So tonight, we're not having a resolution to approve this and go to council? Is that what I hear?
No, what I meant was the resolution would be for a recommendation, not approval.
Okay.
Ms. Cooper.
This is a question probably from Mr. Motzny. The question of, this is a 28-foot width road, but it's private. Can the residents then decide whether or not to have parking on the side of the road? How would that work?
It is something that they could put in the condominium bylaws or the master deed. They as a private road, they can prohibit parking on the road.
And it looks like the driveways, and it looks like the driveway itself is big enough for people to park if they were visiting.
So that each unit would have space for 2 cars in the garage, at least 2 in the driveway, plus guest parking, plus if it's determined that it's okay to park on one side of the street.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Cruz? No?
No. No, I think that we could probably do a resolution.
Yeah, Mr. Krent.
This is to Brent. So the developer offered that he would look into other siding treatments for the sides of the buildings. Do we need another review here, or can that be handled by you or Ben, or how does that, what's the best way to handle that review of the materials?
I've got a couple of ideas. Okay. At the end of the day, it's up to the Planning Commission, acting by resolution. I heard a number of planning commissioners, I don't know if it was a majority or not, we didn't take a roll call vote. I heard at least 3 state that their preference would be for a non-vinyl siding product. You could certainly make a recommendation that it be non-vinyl, and then perhaps the applicant can go to City Council and display their wares and let Council make the decision. That's an option. Another is to postpone the item, come back with, give the applicant an opportunity to crunch some numbers and see if what the comfort level is. I'm not trying to minimize this because design is important. I'm just we're talking about the sides and the back of the buildings. We all know that they will be viewed. We've talked about that. So it is important, again, not as important as a front, but still an important element. So the question you have to ask, is it worth
Another meeting.
another meeting? Is it worth at least 3 weeks and another meeting or not? And does a majority of the Planning Commission feel that this is an issue or not? If it's 3 of you out of 8, then it sounds like it maybe isn't an issue. You speak by resolution. Those are 2 ideas, and I'm sure the Planning Commission may have more.
I'll put it back in the chair's lap. Do you want to take a head count to see if we want to have another meeting to review material changes?
Well, I guess we have 2 options, either to vote for another meeting or to allow the applicant to bring forward anything that he would like to add as an amendment to the resolution that would have more teeth to it that in terms of material rather than...
That's true.
So, yes, Ms. Cruz.
I was going to just suggest, as we were talking about the use of the vinyl siding versus, help me with, is it something hardy board?
Fiber cement.
Fiber cement.
That's a generic term.
Fiber cement board, that's good. I was going to suggest that possibly in our resolution, we could add language in there that states the Planning Commission recommends the use of a fiber cement board instead of the vinyl siding. And then that way the applicant would have time to go back and do a cost analysis or whatever he wants to do. But then when he comes in front of City Council, he would have to, if he determined that he still wanted to go with vinyl siding, he would have to explain to City Council why the use of the vinyl siding was reasonable in light of our design standards in the ordinances. But we could move this forward and let it be decided at the City Council level, and then he can work on making his argument if he decides not to go with our recommendation.
Sure, we can do that, Mr.
I think that's really well stated, way better than I did. I did see what I believe was consensus of the Planning Commission and also agreement of the applicant that the garage doors as proposed in the amended revised drawing was something the Planning Commission, and it was offered. So that can go in the resolution as well.
Okay.
Because it was offered.
We can do
To
that.
include the window.
And just one thought I had for the applicant, for whatever it's worth. I think this project that you're bringing to Troy is kind of like almost like a landmark project because of the nature of the units, the square footage, the same way we had the first cluster that came to Troy back on, I think, Beach and Long Lake, our first cluster. That was the first one that came after we passed the ordinance. I think this one is really in similar ways that type of project, and I think it would benefit you greatly to add any kind of features to in terms of quality of the project, because it's such a landmark project in terms of the square footage and master on the first floor, and this is the first of its kind that we have in Troy that you're bringing to Troy. So just throwing that out as a thought. So, but yeah, Mr.
Ready for
Krantz.
resolution?
I think we're ready for a resolution, Mr.
Okay.
Krantz.
You want me to do it?
Sure.
Okay. Resolve, the Planning Commission recommends to the City Council that preliminary site condominium approval pursuant to Article 8, Section 10.04 of the zoning ordinance as requested for Midtown Crossing Site Condominium 14 units/lots west side of Rochester between Creston and Trinway, Section 10, currently zoned R-1C, one family residential district, be granted subject to the following. Number 1, submit an open space guarantee covenant for the city attorney review prior to the City Council consideration. Number 2, include garage door lights as part of the final submission for all units. And 3,
I have that kind of drafted.
Pardon?
I have that kind of
Good, why don't you do it?
already.
Great, go ahead. Continue, please.
The Planning Commission recommends the use of fiber cement siding in lieu of vinyl siding. If the applicant does not use fiber cement siding, the applicant must explain why it's reasonable when it's not in line with our city ordinances and design standards.
Excellent. Thank you. Do you want to second that, Karen?
Thank you. Moved by Mr. Krent. Do you want a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Cruz. Did you get all that, Ms. Arnicki? Okay. I think we're ready for a roll call.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
For those in the audience, those watching it from home, it was not approved. That was a recommendation. It will be going in front of City Council at a public hearing at a future meeting. Those who reside within 300 feet of this project will receive notification in the mail, and there will also be an article published in the local paper. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
I'm so sorry, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Just one other comment, just for the public and for everybody. I just wanted to put everybody on notice, just to avoid any phone calls to the city. We do have a demolition permit for the one house at 5175 Rochester Road. It is an eyesore. We want to get that taken care of. So in case, when we do start the demolition, just so people aren't calling thinking that, oh, we're starting this development, which isn't even approved yet. This way Brent doesn't get a bunch of phone calls. But we do have a soil erosion permit for that property. We do have a demolition permit. The utilities have been cut off. So I think we do have to cut and cap the sanitary sewer. So those operations will probably start early next week sometime. So just so nobody's bothering Brent, oh my gosh, you guys are starting the development without permits. We're just doing the demo on the house. The White House, that's at 5215, the White House, which is part of the consent judgment, that is currently staying intact because the consent judgment is still in place until we modify the consent judgment. And then at some point as part of the site development, we'll reapply for another demolition permit, utility cutoffs, soil erosion permit, et cetera, in order to demolish that White House that's there.
Bless you.
God bless you. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Appreciate your time. We really enjoyed the format.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Brent does a great job. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Checks in the mail.
It was a team effort. It really was. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before the next item, I have an issue with my computer, so could we take a brief break? See if
Sure.
Ms. Zarnicki can get this sorted out?
Sure, we'll do that. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Okay, thank you.
located on the east side of Livernois, just south of Square Lake Road, just north of Cutting. At the last meeting, we discussed this project at length, and the major focus of our discussion was on this, the elevations and the floor plan for this building. We talked at length about the transparency requirements along Livernois for the neighborhood node, and the applicant revised the drawings to provide significant windows and dramatically increase the level of transparency along Livernois, and that clearly exceeds the 50% transparency requirement. They also talked about relocating the door that used to sit approximately here and centering it, making the building more, that face of the building more symmetrical, enlarging the windows here, improving the flow of the floor plan, and they made those changes. Now, one thing that was pointed out to me this evening by Mr. Apahedi, and I believe he had a planning commissioner mention it to him, we talked about this pillar element, how it was, and the pillar element plus this decorative architectural feature here that juts into the sidewalk and perhaps makes the sidewalk at this area almost unusable for someone if there's cars parked here. So that's something we're going to want to discuss. Other than that, the planning department recommends preliminary site plan approval subject to the three conditions. One is that the second floor cannot be occupied. It can be used for storage or other ancillary uses, but cannot be used as functioning office space. They submit a photometric plan to the planning department prior to final site plan approval. I would note they have submitted a photometric plan, but I did not want to confuse the planning commission by our report saying that it hadn't, and then I produce a photometric plan. It complicates things, so they will keep it the way that it's written. And finally, that they provide details of the proposed retaining wall elevation prior to final site plan approval. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would welcome discussion about the elevation, the north-facing elevation.
Thank you, Mr. Savana. Any questions for Mr. Savana? No questions at this time, and the applicant is here. You can step forward.
Thank you for having me back. Obviously, last time I was here, we talked at length. As an attorney, I have the ability to talk at length. I'm happy to do so again. That said, I don't know that you'd want to hear it. We did make the changes. We have submitted, with respect to all those three items, we didn't submit in time for Mr. Savidan. He had already submitted the documents to you. So he does have the items, and he will consider them, obviously, in due time. I'm asking you to approve it, much like, subject to those conditions, which I believe we have satisfied. With respect to the north face elevations, I think it may have been briefly mentioned last time, and I did briefly mention it to my architect, but perhaps not enough for him to make the change in the rendering. With respect to, and I think the issue is those two vases over there, which make it look like some sort of a Roman something. And I guess in my mind they're useless, and they do impede the flow. So in the actual rendering that I've seen, that I've submitted, they're not featured. It's just simply the whatever, not those vase things anyways. It's just simply the rest of the facade. So that's my proposed resolution to it, to the extent there can be a proposed resolution. So
Did I put the wrong rendering in here?
No, you did.
Okay.
You did do the fine. You did everything fine. If anything, it's our architect that did he simply left that feature there where it shouldn't have. But other than that, obviously last time we spoke with respect to transparency requirements, both in the front on the north side as well as the Livernois side. Those we made those changes. We removed those doors. Thank you. That was a great suggestion. That I frankly I love it. We added a door on the east side of the building that you don't see in this rendering. We added a door there and a hallway, and that's for all the employees, not all the employees, for those of us that are going to work here to be able to access, the building instead of just having to go through the front door. And I think the building is, as a matter of fact, my architect even put 3, men over there walking, which is, I guess, his idea of what an attorney looks like. I think he used Mr. Motzley for one of those, but that's just me. I don't know. I mean, so
all attorneys look like that.
yeah, according to my architect, though, clearly they do. I mean, I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. I think, and by the way, my brother will attest to the fact that I called out the fact that you were probably an attorney, and he verified it, just on account of your manner of speech. How about that?
I was G-rated.
Well, I don't know. So, that said, like I said, I'll stop speaking. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Ms. Cruz?
Okay, I'm not sure I understand. The on your pillars,
yes,
those are those little things that jut out and then hold the Grecian urns.
Correct.
Right? So you're saying those bases are also gone. It's just the straight up and down.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep the pillar. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, not the base and the base. I mean, the base and the base holder thing. I think it's too much.
Okay. I gotcha. That just needed clarification.
No, absolutely.
That it wasn't just the urns; it was also the.
Yeah, the area, so that it's accessible, because it's right in this rendering, and I guess and I don't know if the prior picture shows, if you look at it from above, it does stop the flow, the walking flow from that sidewalk is about 5 feet. It's about 6 though when you look at the when in that proposed rendering, if you were to zoom in and look at the dimensions by the door, it's actually 6 to account for the pillars. For the extension of the pillars, but not for the extension of the vases on top of the pillars, I suppose, which is why I would want to do away with it.
So the sidewalk on the north elevation, you said it's 6 feet from the
yeah, from my review of the.
Do we have a dimension on that, Mr. Savanah? Does the plot plan actually show the sidewalk being 6 feet, or what's the actual dimension on it? Is it 5 feet?
And the way they've done it, if you were to look at it, it's 5 feet. I apologize, but it's the area of where the pillars are. It measures 5 feet from the addition, from the area where the pillars are. That's how it measures the 5 feet. So it's 5 feet starting from the corner of the building, going all the way there, and then it measures from the extension 5 feet.
Mr. Krent.
I'm referring to the west wall, the wall that faces Livernois. It seems like what we had was too small, and this is like, wow, way too big. Isn't there like a Goldilocks solution here that would...
You're looking at it, you're just not accepting it. It's 51%. So
it's 50%?
51.
Wow.
Yep.
If I added up...
Yeah, I had the same feeling when I saw it as well. But that's exactly, he calculated, he did the calculation. If you look at the actual drawings, he's got a little note someplace with respect to the actual transparency. It says 51%.
If that's what it is, it is. But I would prefer on your north elevation where you've got an arched element over the window and then a non-arched the top window. I would like to see that carried around that side.
I'll sell you the building, and then you can have it.
No, I'm
just
not
kidding.
saying that I want the building, but I'm just saying it just looks like it's out of place.
No, I understand, and I agree with you. It looks, it looks large, and I thought the windows last time looked more fitting as far as that. But actually, you know what? On the inside, it'll be great. It'll look great, and it meets the, this is in meeting with the city's requirement when it comes to neighborhood node, and this is the, if you recall, last time our conversation was with respect to, in a neighborhood node, you would prefer the door to be on this side. We're removing the door. We're having larger windows, meeting this 50% requirement. It meets it. It's at 51%. I agree with you, but it is what it is.
Just my observation.
Absolutely. I understand. Absolutely.
Mr. Tagle.
Is there any requirements in the code about sidewalks, not public sidewalks, but sidewalks internally, as far as what their minimum width is?
Yeah, the requirement's for a minimum 5 foot.
Okay, all right. I understand that if you look at your site plan, you look at this elevation, and they don't match. Those vertical piers that surround your center door, to me, I would guess maybe they're 18 inches off the face of that building. I look at your site plan, and it says you've got a 5-foot walkway, but those piers don't show up on your site plan. So when those piers show up, they're going to encroach on that 5-foot walkway. Now, a solution may be, if you look at your parking, your handicapped parking spaces, the spaces on the west end of your parking, if you were to push those a little bit further to the north, and I don't, again, I'm not scaling your drawings, you may be able to pick up enough dimension so that you can get 5 foot past in front of those pilasters or those piers.
I agree. Done. I agree.
Your architect needs to make sure you can do it. I'm suggesting to.
No, I understand. You can, because it's still within the property, it's still within the setbacks.
Well, I know you can move it,
Yeah.
yes, but dimensionally, I don't know if you'll pick up what you need, because I'm guessing the depth of those piers, and I'm sure they're adjustable, but if you look at your site plan, they don't represent what you want to accomplish in your elevation.
No, I understand your point, and I'm saying to the extent that it's possible, and I think it is, based on my review of it and based on
Well, just know that you need 5 foot in front of that pier for the sidewalk.
Understood.
Another concern, at least from that elevation, and I'm not sure if the site plan even reflects that, but that elevation doesn't show any ADA compliant ramp. I don't know, has your architect addressed that in terms of?
He does, there was
Is the ramp on the east side? Is the ADA on the east side? Okay.
Yes, there is.
So your handicap space is on the west side, and your ramp is all the way around on the east side of the building? Is that?
That I'll have to review, pardon me.
The handicap.
He shows it, I don't know that he shows on which side it is, but you are right that the handicap parking is on the west side. He shows the detail on the site plan with respect to the ADA compliant ramp, but I don't think he says it. That's where it's.
Another concern would be just exactly that, with if you're 5 foot walk and you have those pillars encroaching into that space, you're left with barely 3 feet. And if your ADA access is on the east side, then you would have a client actually having to go all the way around through your parking space to get to the ramp and then come back to your front door. So I'm not sure how that would be welcomed by.
I'd have to think about the fees they're about to pay all the way in. I can only see benefit there, but I understand your point, and I will address it. Yes.
Okay.
So he's going to be required to provide ADA access to the building, including a ramp. I'm looking at this and spending time reviewing this, and I believe he could accommodate Mr. Tagle's requirement. It's a requirement of the city. It would be a requirement of the building code as well, not only for the 5 foot sidewalk, but also the barrier-free ramp. I believe there's some very simple solutions to accommodate those requirements.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions on this, or are we actually ready for a resolution? We've seen it already 3 times, this actual revised project, second time before us, so. I kind of agree with Mr. Krent on that west side elevation. I think they're, just from that rendering, it does look like it's more than 50%, but Mr. Salvador, does 50%, does the ordinance actually require 50% of the entire elevation and all the way to the peak? What's the actual square footage that's used as an elevation?
So when I look at this, I believe that there's a slight miscalculation. I think this is a little bit more than 51%. I believe the measurement is from 2 feet above grade to 8 feet above grade. And that's you take that swath, that 6-foot swath, right across the building, and 50% of that swath has to be transparent. And it looks like that maybe they're factoring in that bottom band of brick along that's less than 2 feet. So if the Planning Commission wanted to verify, have the architect verify that was 51 and encourage down to 51, because it does look like it is more than 51%. That you could certainly make that put that in your motion.
Just, I don't know, just to kind of echo what Mr. Krentz said, and Mr. Tagle, I don't know if you wanted to comment on this, but personally, if it would be my building, I think that the front windows with that arch, just duplicated on the west elevation, would fit in a lot better than just the windows that are there right now. It would just the scale of that entire elevation to the actual window would work better, and it would probably meet that 50% based on what you said, Mr. Savidan, right? If you have
just eyeballing a rendering, which it's a rendering, but I did look at the elevations. Eyeballing it does look like they could put smaller windows in here. That's what it looks like, but I didn't do the calculations.
Okay, then I guess we can just leave it at that, or at least leave it up to the applicant to make changes if he wishes to change that elevation at this point. Okay, I think we're ready for a resolution. Or Mr. Tagle, did you want to?
Preliminary site plan?
Preliminary site plan review, yes.
So confirmation could come at final site plan approval when it comes to you?
Yes. A recommendation could be something to the effect of confirmation that that it still meets 50% transparency and reducing the window size if necessary. Something I just made that up. Didn't do a very good job of wordsmithing, but that's something you could have in your resolution.
Okay, I think we're ready.
I would say not only reduce the window size, but to have it more in line with what's on the north elevation. Because otherwise they look very incongruous.
They look like two different buildings.
Yeah.
If I may, the north elevation, though, has 30% transparency. So while I'm happy to adjust the transparency, meaning the 51%, whatever it may be, whatever the 51% is, while I'm happy to meet that wherever it is, because I agree that these windows, they're not the ideal. The ideal was what was reflected last time before you, or something close to. So whatever that magic number is, the 51% number is, I'm happy to get to that number, obviously, even if it means reducing the windows. Because I presume I'll have a hard time finding this window out there in the market. I'd have to carve it out. So, but yeah, I'm just making that note on account of the difference between the transparency on the north versus the west side of the building. That's all.
Okay. I think we're ready for a resolution. Somebody want to read the resolution?
You want to do this one, Mike?
Not today.
Mike?
Okay, all right. I'll go ahead
Mr.
with
Krent.
it. Your glasses. Thanks.
Small change.
Thanks. Okay, resolved. The Planning Commission hereby approves a deviation of off-street parking requirements by approving 8 on-site parking spaces when 13 spaces are required by zoning ordinance. This 5-space parking deviation is authorized by section 13.06.f of the City of Troy zoning ordinance and is based on information provided by the applicant specifically related to office staffing and client visits. Be it finally resolved that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance is requested for the proposed office building located on the east side of Livernois, south of Square Lake, 5956 Livernois, Section 21, within the NN Neighborhood Node Q District, be granted subject to the following. Second floor cannot be occupied. Number 2, photometric plan submitted prior to final site plan approval. Number 3, retaining, we got a retaining wall in there? Retaining wall elevation. Do we have a retaining wall? Oh, okay. retaining wall elevation submitted prior to final site plan approval. Number 4, have the math checked for the windows on the west side, the Livernois side of the building, so that no more than 50% is transparent, and that the design of the window layout is similar to what's on the north side of the building.
Moved by Mr. Krant.
You want to add?
You want to add something, Mr.
Yeah,
Krant?
we want to maintain the 5-foot sidewalk, minimum 5-foot sidewalk in front of the piers.
Yeah. Number 5, maintain a 5-foot sidewalk on the north side of the building.
Do we need to be specific and say from the most protruding architectural element?
Yes.
Because that could be vague in that it would be from the face of the building.
But I thought that was a legal requirement.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
That you don't need to put that in there because that's law.
I believe you're correct.
Okay.
Could just go, I'm sorry, Mr. Tagle.
He's going to adjust the site plan. He's going to have to move something to make that work, whether it's law or not. So if you want in your final site plan for it to reflect the legal sidewalk and where the parking spaces are going to be and the curb's going to be along the north property line, I would suggest to leave it in there. I guess pose that as a question.
It doesn't hurt to leave it in there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mr. Krant said not to exceed 50%. I mean, if he's at 50.8, can we say instead of not to exceed, can we say approximately 50%?
Yes, well, I'll amend that to be approximately 50% of the required area for transparency.
Okay, got a motion for the amendment supported by Mr. Sanzica. Roll call, Ms. Sarnicki, please.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Ms. Koopa?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzica?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes?
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion passes.
I have a quick comment.
Yes.
I just want to compliment the applicant for such a fine job on the site plan. From the initial site plan we saw to today, it's a substantial difference. Very nice job.
I'll second that. That's wonderful, considering the limitations of that site. You've done the architects pulled it out of the hat. Nice going, magician.
Okay, moving on to item number 9, public comment for items on the current agenda. Anybody in the audience that wishes to comment on anything on the current agenda? Seeing none, moving on to item number 10, Planning Commission comments. We'll start with Ms. Sarnicki. Ms. Howe.
I actually found out during the 5-minute break, thanks to a gentleman in the audience, that today was my last meeting. I thought it would be until August, so I didn't have anything prepared for this. But, and I was gone for a significant portion of the summer in China and graduation. So, but these 2 years on the Planning Commission, I have so many people to thank. I want to thank Brent from the very beginning for just always being there when I needed questions answered or understanding if I slept through a meeting or just anything that I needed from the first moment till today. Ms. Koopa for mentoring me and for encouraging me as an Asian American woman into the public sphere, especially in the very beginning. I appreciate that support. And this experience is something that's outside of my comfort zone. Before I joined the Planning Commission, I was fully head-on STEM. And there was nothing in my mind that I would do anything remotely like this, but I found this opportunity, and it was something that I found interesting, but I didn't realize how much it would teach me about this city that I had grown up in for 10 plus years, but I knew nothing about until I joined this commission. I learned first and foremost, that Troy is a city that is developing and growing and alive, and even more so with all the, like, such as the, just a city that that so many people care about, and that so many people deserve to care about, and that made me care about the city, taught me a lot about what it meant to be invested and involved in my community, and it's made an impact on me, for me to want to continue to be involved in whatever community I live in, wherever that may be in the future. So thank you. And thank you to Mr. Edmonds, who I think was the utmost role model in what it meant to be involved and to love one city.
Mr. Hudson.
Two things. Listening to Claire and seeing her in this commission for 2 years gives me a great deal of hope for the next generation. We have more people like Claire who are in great shape. Claire, you've been a wonderful participant in this.
Thank you.
Secondly, let me comment on Mr. Edmonds. My memory of Don is that he almost always visited every site physically that comes before this commission. And I used to think that he was just a well-minded civic person, but I came to believe that since he was an agronomist, he went out to every site to preserve any big tree that may be in jeopardy, and he was going to make sure it didn't get cut down. I'm done.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper.
Man, this is hard. Claire will miss you. Really will miss you. But you can come back and visit.
Before I leave for college, there's 2 meetings left.
And even when you come back home, if you're out here on a Tuesday night that there's a planning commission meeting, come visit.
Go out and have a good time.
Maybe my good time is a planning commission.
Exactly. But my first planning commission meeting was in this room. I was really nervous. And I tripped on one of these steps back here. And Don said, I did that on my first planning commission meeting too, Padma. And he made me feel so much at home. And the rest of you have done the same since then, but he was after me to take those planning commission classes, and I'm going to miss him. That's all.
Mr. Tagle.
Well, Claire, I have to second Mike's comments. You give me a lot of hope for the young people coming up in the world. Unfortunately, what we hear in the media or read in the media is not always the positive side. But you're a very, very intelligent young lady. You struck me as you're not shy to speak up, even though this may be a foreign topic or subject to you. You're willing to ask questions and learn. So I appreciate your involvement and your participation over the last couple of years. Quite honestly, the time flies. You know, I didn't realize it had been 2 years, but enjoyed having you here.
Thank you.
And for Don, you know, Don just struck me as, well, he always wanted to learn. He would always ask questions, whether it was here in public forum or whether he and I would have a conversation, but he was always trying to improve his understanding of a subject or a topic or a building material or whatever it was. But again, I have to agree with Mike. He, when it came to the landscaping, I kind of looked at Don and say, you know, okay, I'm going to listen now and be quiet and see what he has to say. But I will miss him. He was a gentle spirit for me on this committee, and yeah, my prayers go out to his family.
Well, Claire, I'm going to echo much of what has already been said here today about your involvement in the Planning Commission. I can't believe it's been 2 years either, and frankly, I'm used to having you around. And now that you're gonna leave us, you'll be missed. I appreciate your curious nature and your courage in asking questions for things that you didn't quite understand, and not being worried about looking stupid, right? I'm not a believer in stupid questions. So when you don't know, you ask. That's the best way to learn, and you seem to have grasped that. And for that alone, I think you'll go far. With respect to Don, you summed it up so well when you said he was consummate. He was consummate in many ways, not only as a planning commissioner and understanding the ordinances and keeping abreast of trends within planning and urban planning, and also as our resident landscaping expert, but just as a citizen. I mean, he and his wife both have been so involved in this city and have been leaders and have cared, and people like that are hard to find, and I respect that, and I will miss him, and hope that we're all better planning commissioners and have a little piece of Don in us going forward.
Claire, just to echo everything that was said already here, I just thank you for your contribution, for your brilliant thought, for your brilliant insight that you brought to the Planning Commission with your comments, and just a unique perspective from somebody that is from your generation and from outside of this body. And I just appreciate that somebody like you can actually be part of this body and actually bring that insight from the academic world, from locally here in Troy. So one thing that I really hope for is that whoever, maybe you can reach out to somebody at Troy High that can at least be at least half as inquisitive as you were in participating and bringing great insight and great questions to this body. So again, we will miss you, and just good luck in all your endeavors in the future and in college and anything. Now that you have another option other than STEM, whatever that might look like. And just one thought about Don, that really I remember him as being somebody that was very, very gifted with the gift of encouragement. I think he just always had a positive word to say, and he just brought that with him in conversation and dialogue, even in topics that were controversial or that we could debate them up here, but he always had a positive word to say. So his encouraging way and his demeanor and his gift of encouragement will be missed, and I will miss him. Mr. Faison.
So continuing the same theme. So Claire, I appreciate your active engagement, and I think you are a constructive part of the Planning Commission. I think that's great, and I think that's an accomplishment that says a lot about you. And I know you'll be successful, as has been said before, too. With regard to Don, I was really saddened to hear about Don. Don's a friend of mine, and I've known him 15-ish years. And my condolences go out to Ida and his family. As I think a lot of you know, Ida and my wife, Wendy, served on the school board for a number of years. So we've known the Edmonds and were impressed by their kindness, their intelligence, and their engagement in the city of Troy. And I wouldn't be at this table if it wasn't for Don encouraging me to do this. And like Ms. Cooper said, he said, that's not enough. You got to go take the training, the MAP training. You got to take the classes. You got to take the exam, and be focused on driving positive development in the city of Troy. So, I'll miss Don, but I'll keep kind of those thoughts in my head as I continue to participate here. So thanks.
Well, likewise, I'd like to echo the remainder of the balance of the commissioner's comments. Quite honestly, I think you're the first student representative that ever made a comment at the time that I've been here. And it was very insightful and thoughtful, and I think I really praise you for that. And I'm sure you're going to do well in all your endeavors. So congratulations, and I'm sure you're going to do well in college and in your life. Regarding Don, it's sad for his passing. I remember the first day that he came on the Planning Commission He learned so much, and he took on the role of a good planning commissioner, all the training and all the advice, and he's just very insightful. And I was his vice chairman, I don't know, for 2 or 3 years, I believe. And just his dedication, I don't think he ever missed a meeting. I don't think I was ever a chairman of a meeting. He always came to meetings, and I was happy that he did that. But he was a very insightful man, and he was an engineer, an environmental engineer. And I think his insight was well taken. He ran a good meeting. I remember one time, I think I had a long day at work and must have gotten up really early, and it was a long, boring meeting. I was falling asleep in the seat. He's poking me in the ribs. He said, "Wake up, wake up." He was a gentleman, and he was very, very good man, and we'll miss him quite a bit. Wish all to his family too. And I didn't know him as long as you did, but all these years he was on the planning commission, he was a very, very kind gentleman. Thank you.
Well, Claire, brilliant. That's all I got to say about you. You're brilliant. You really brought some neat insight to our discussions that other people never brought up, and that was really key to your brilliance. You saw things that we maybe either missed or didn't expect. Didn't have your insight. And you brought it forward, and it was really refreshing to hear your comments. As far as Don and I go a few decades back, but mostly with Ida, his wife. I served on the Parks and Rec board for 19 years, and she was on it from the school board. And I got introduced to Don through his wife, Ida, and just a delight, the whole family, just delightful, always positive, always doing great stuff for the community, not just here at the Don, not only his work here at the Planning Commission, but all around the community. Don was active. There's so many things you've already mentioned about making sure we're trained. He encouraged me to be on the Planning Commission for one, but second, he encouraged me to take the training and pass the tests and do all that. He kind of almost made sure that I was well informed about things, and I could go on and on about all the great things, but I'm going to try to emulate the kind of presence he commanded when he was in a room. And to refer off of your comment about I was vice chair for a while too. One meeting I got to be chair, one, but that just shows his commitment to this body, how he was so committed to being here, being present, being well informed, and coming up with interesting insight again on our process. So thank you, Don.
So Claire, good luck with your studies moving forward. When you are finished your studies, and I'm sure that's probably 5, 6, 7 years away, who knows? I've got a sneaking suspicion you've got a few degrees left to finish up. I hope you decide to settle down in Southeast Michigan, in Troy, and serve on the Planning Commission, because you'd be terrific. It'd be great to see you come full circle and sit a little further this way on the dais. That'd be great. Well, I met Don 15 or so years ago, and it's funny, he was the HOA representative for a project that opposed the development, and I met him. He was a spokesperson for the neighborhood, and he was championing on behalf of his neighbors a temporary street barricade. And of course, I was representing the city, and we were championing interconnectivity. So Don and I butted heads the first few times we communicated. In fact, it went back and forth for a few months, but it was always respectful and constructive and positive, and we became friends at that time through that process, and that friendship continued as he served on the Planning Commission. Great Planning Commissioner, great person. I'm going to miss him. Thanks.
No comments, thank you.
If we have no other comments, then we are adjourned for tonight. Thank you.